if people don't feel safe or seen around you, you're not leading, you're just in charge.
Mhm.
Another RPG comes in.
Mhm.
I fall on my chest. My arms suspended in the air, the donut still intact. 7 of us. Adrenaline's going, and someone shouts out, "James, you got the donut." Laughter erupted. One donut brought a bit of normality and humanity and connection to us. People don't really give two hoots what you have to say.
Mhm.
They want to see, what do you do when things kick off? So leadership is exposed. Human-centered leadership is the new future skill. So I've come up with a term, I call it situational authenticity. Don't try to outrun yourself
Mhm.
or earn your place, because we all have a place.
The main reason I wanted to have you here when I met you is because I think you have one of the most impressive, genuinely adaptive careers. Like literally so many different um paths that you have gone for. So what's your story? In your own words.
Bear with me, because there are a lot of pivots in my story. So yes, I hadn't had a straight line career. So what I've learned throughout all my pivots is that environment, values, and trust has been key, but also where I can be myself.
Mhm.
And all of the roles I've done have supported that. And actually, when they haven't, and I found my wings being clipped, I've changed the environment. And I think where I saw environment play a big part was at college.
Mhm.
School I didn't enjoy, didn't do very well at school. College changed everything. Cultural diversity, I think just that diversity of thought backgrounds, that's where I found my wings. At 18, I was really lucky. I had a masterclass in leadership. I was executive assistant to a CEO of a global corporation. And that's where I really had the front row seat to see leadership up close from a culture.
Very early on, which is very important.
Very early.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that wasn't enough for me. And I signed up to the military reserves. Then in 2004, I was compulsory deployed to Iraq
Mhm.
to lead a community policing program. So I was training the Iraqi police out there for probably 10 months. Um, Life-changing experience. When I talk about leadership now, my understanding is my lived experience of doing it in such a high pressure environment.
Mhm.
So I took that learning, came back to the corporate world, worked for Virgin, worked for the CFO at the time, helped him with the $2 billion merger, which is now Virgin Media. Virgin then sent me out to India as their head of comms and culture to lead one of their joint ventures. That was amazing. And actually, that's where I really learned how to pivot, because often with a Western brand, you can't lift and shift into a different country. There's lots of cultural sensitivities. So from a leadership perspective, having that awareness is really important. And that supports obviously the pivoting bit. And then I came back, and what happened after that? Probably several years later, I was made redundant from Vodafone.
Okay.
And I'd lost my sense of purpose. All that pivoting.
And I mean, it's different if you're not expecting the change, if it's not a change by choice. That's the thing, right? And a lot of people also have experienced it recently with all the layoffs across. So
Correct.
where did that take you?
Going back to the layoffs, it was interesting because when you do face, and I've been laid off 3 times in my career,
Okay.
I take it as part of life now. You just get back up and you reinvent yourself. But it gave me a point to reflect and really think, what do I want to do? And then what gives me that fire in my belly? We can work for big corporations, yes, great money, all of that, but there's more to life than that. So I've always been into fitness. I'm a runner, and I've always actually quite admired yoga, but never did it. So I trained as a yoga and mindfulness culture and people experience. I wanted to understand a bit more about human psychology, well-being, what gets people stressed, what's the mechanisms, what's the leadership behaviors that we sometimes miss. So I took a year off. And the pandemic hit, and I was able to support people online through yoga classes at home. So it was really fulfilling. And then after a year, I got bored. This a bit more stimulation. Went as head of comms for Vista Village. That was a global role. That was great.
Oh, nice. Love Mr. Village.
Yeah. And they did a bit of a stint at ASOS as their workplace experience to help them during Black Friday, which was their peak trading to help. I think there was about 2,000 millennials that we were engaging with. So that was a fantastic role. And most recently, 4 years, I've been at Deloitte. So leading their UK Culture Council, doing some wellbeing stuff. And my next chapter is my new consultancy, called Trust by Design. So I've taken all of my learnings from military frontline, corporate frontline, values, and I'm merging it into providing culture and leadership consultancy, but also keynote speaking, where I talk about the donut principle, which is quite a funny story about my time in Iraq. And actually, I use that as a metaphor, how we earn, protect, and rebuild trust under pressure.
Exactly. The adaptive career, we have the war zone Iraq, then we have the pivot to corporate, then we have the pivot to wellness, solo exploring, then we have pivot back to corporate. But come to today then. Donut. What is the donut principle? You got me curious. What is the story?
In Iraq, meal times were the ritual that actually you look forward to. So it made the day feel almost normal with all the bombs and everything that we had going on. It was quite a volatile time during the time I was there. And the food wasn't great, but you still look forward to the meals. And 7 of us were in a tent waiting for queuing up for our food. Anyway, you hear push come in. The tent shakes a bit. We just keep chatting because we're used to it. Another bomb comes in, closer to the tent this time. The tent shakes. Radios burst. Take hard cover. Everyone scrambles, grabs their kit. What do? I go, what's going on? I'm like, I want that donut. I grab the donut, as well as getting my body armor and my weapon and my webbing, running across the compound to hard cover. Another RPG comes in. I fall on my chest. My arms suspended in the air, the donut still intact. Don't ask me. I still don't know to this day. My colleague, my comrade Dev, was in front of me. He turned around, came back, picked me up by the scruff of my neck, and we ran together to hard cover. He made a choice in that moment not to keep running, but to come back for me. He probably saved my life.
Yeah.
We both ran to the hard cover. Silence. 7 of us. Adrenaline's going. And someone shouts out, James, he got the donut. Laughter erupted. I shared the donut with 7 of them. But the point of the metaphor of the story is that one donut brought a bit of normality and humanity and connection to us. And I could share that as a simple thing where we all felt we weren't alone.
Yeah.
And that's the concept around earning, protecting, and rebuilding trust. And Dev made a conscious choice to act and come back for me. But army, often people think, oh, it's tough and, the discipline. But if you think we're all trained with the same skills, it all comes down to character. And I call it depth and substance.
Okay.
Because we all have the same skills.
How do you define depth and substance from a character perspective?
Having a real awareness about yourself, the rights and wrongs, and that compass that guides you. And it's so overwhelming, you can't ignore it. And that's what I learned in the military. And I mentioned Virgin being a bit of a hard pivot going to an emerging market. With the army, it was the interdependencies of how we were so reliant on each other as a team, as a unit. Our lives depended on it. So in corporates, you've got teams you work with. You're similar, not that your life's on the line, but you are interdependent around your delivery, the speed, the quality, the psychological safety you create with each other. You watch each other's backs. You can speak openly in a meeting. Exactly the same.
But funnily enough, I feel that in corporate, because your lives are not on the line, those survival instincts or like your true compass doesn't kick in because you're often caught in the routine or the how do I show off more or how do I get the promo. So you talked about self-awareness. You talked about your compass and knowing your true North Star, your values, right? Back to the Doughnut principle. How would you, like, that is the story, but how do you bring that story? If you were to put some pillars, framework, how do we make it tangible when it comes to trust, teamwork? How do you bring that now into your consultancy in tangible terms?
I have three stories that I use to enable. Um, Two of them are mainly in Iraq. So one was where I mentioned, responsible for training the Iraqi police force. And that was quite a difficult job. A woman of color carrying a weapon of authority. And they weren't ready to listen to me. It's like, who are you?
Expected.
Expected. Now, if I went in there to dominate and lead, I wouldn't have got nowhere. So leadership started for me before I spoke a single word. And that was reading the room, listening through an interpreter. So it wasn't through my words, like most people who talk. If you're doing it through somebody else, a vehicle, it's even harder. So body language, tone, energy, posture, that's what helped me influence, build trust. And the trust I built with these officers, they were able to then do it themselves on the streets and then get the communities to come in and give us intelligence information so we could help make things better for them. And that's what success looks like, that it works. And that leadership was quite subtle. It wasn't about bossing it, dominating. It was around understanding the people that you're leading and being as open and transparent as you can, but respectful and listening. We don't do enough listening, I don't think.
We don't do enough listening. Very true. And I like the way you talk about it. It sounds like you kickstart a domino effect, which is like you do this to them, they do it. So it's like a chain. If you think about the corporate
Correct.
hierarchy and chain as well, right? And that's why the people involved are so important because it's like putting in the first part of the donut and then go down. But if we stay a bit on the top, whether it's the leaders listening, your experience, like how do you even start understanding the other person? You know what you said is like, it's first about really understanding what the people need and what they want and actively listening. And everyone talks about actively listening. No one does it. So how does it look in practice? What can I change tomorrow? I'm listening to that. Like what is one thing I can do differently?
So let me go back to the self-awareness bit. If you know yourself, your triggers, your strengths, your weaknesses, you don't learn those overnight. You have to do a lot of deep work and reflection. Once you know that, you are able to extend empathy to somebody else. If you don't know yourself, it's impossible to give empathy. We tell leaders all the time, show empathy, listen, do well-being check-ins. Know thyself. Start with yourself. You are then able to lead effectively. When I talk about active listening, once you know yourself, you're then able to switch from your ego, leave it at home, and you go and you are there for that person in that moment. They have your full attention.
Also, if you don't listen to your first self, how are you going to listen to the others?
And going back to one of your points is behavior compounds, right? Culture. Culture is not your fancy words you have in your career site, your internal columns. It's behavior, everyday behaviors. And that's not when it's just good. It's when it's bad. Because when the pressure hits, that's where you know what your real culture is. Now, we're humans. Humans follow humans. Behaviors compound. I'll see how you behave. You stay silent in a meeting. You see something that's not quite right. You're a bystander. You don't speak up. You're a leader. You don't necessarily give someone the right space that they need. All of these things compound and we follow and we replicate. And with regards to leadership, how you show up, you're actually giving permission to others with how you show up. So leaders now, and in a lot of my talks, I talk about AI. When I look at that around automation, back in the day, in my day when I started, leadership was around managing the work. Now that efficiency is gone.
Yeah.
There is a buffer. That buffer of time managing the work is removed. So leadership is exposed. Human-centered leadership is the new future skill.
Okay.
And the workforce of the future have the opportunity now to nail it and lead by example. Now, they can change the old school hierarchical buffers, use process, policy to hide behind.
Okay. I have two questions that came to my mind. First one is, how do you break down human-centered leadership? If you were like a future leader or a manager, middle manager, you're a leader without necessarily having the title, or you're a manager and you're not a leader, right? It goes both ways. But what are the skill sets from a leadership perspective you should really top on?
So I take this back, again, going back to my military experience, which has worked transferable skills all across my corporates, is the self-awareness being number one, because it starts with you. I think communication, what's worked for me is I'm dyslexic. So my strength is how I communicate to people and build trust quite quickly. And I think that's being human, the way I talk. I don't tend to use fluffy words. I'm quite direct. And I get to the point. And I think people trust that. There's no hidden kind of agenda. I think behavioral clarity is important. So being able to translate complex into simple. Again, if you want someone to do something, explain it in practical, relatable terms that they can go, I can take that go from A to B rather than,
Okay. And what is, I guess, and trust in that, because you mentioned it earlier, right? So it's like trust and influence. Culture first, because you mentioned earlier, it's the everyday behaviors. So always, as an employee, looking from outside, when I could see a role like culture lead, people lead them culture, I was always wondering what you guys are doing. Who is responsible for the culture? Is it you doing that? Is it the leader? Is it each one of us? Like, whose responsibility to do what? To have this everyday behavior respecting
everybody. Everyone plays a part. As I mentioned, behaviors compound. You behave in a way, I'm in your team, I might follow you. You might be following your leader. They amplify. Yeah. So everybody is responsible. From a leadership perspective, there's more pressure on them because they set the tone from the top and actually they amplify. So leaders now are being watched 24/7. People don't really give two hoots what you have to say. They want to see, what do you do when things kick off? Now, that's when the pressure comes in and that's when you're judged. And, you may earn the trust. You need to work to keep protecting it. And then when it breaks, because it always will, then you need to rebuild it. And that's all about showing up consistently, owning the impact and showing proof, right? Because when we give people our trust, we're constantly looking for evidence that
that they're not going to break it.
Yeah. So that's why the donut is so pivotal as a metaphor, because it's not linear. It runs in a loop. And all of us need to earn it, protect it, rebuild it.
Trust, it can be very intangible. It can be very like, yeah, of course I will say that the trust. And we're like, I'm sure that I can easily build trust. So that's why I'm trying to bring a tangible framework for me to learn, but also everyone watching, is to like, okay, if I have to think, what are behaviors I can start noticing in myself to try and build trust? So one is staying true to what I'm saying, like actions matching words.
So earning trust. Correct. Yeah. Walking the talk. So what you're saying, you're actually living by, right? So you're earning it slowly, consistently, because trust is not earned once. And also, you don't inherit it just because you have a title of manager. It's like you have to earn it. There's a quote I use: if people don't feel safe or seen around you, you're not leading, you're just in charge. Leadership is around inspiring, speaking up when you need to, and also managing upwards, right? Because they're responsible to ask the questions to the seniors that your people can't ask, rather than just say, it is what it is. I don't have any more information.
I think managing up is very important, because it's like what compounds the workload or stress or pressure down to middle management and lower, because I feel like managing up, it's one about behaviors. So if you think something, how do you break domino or recycle maybe like that underlying culture? The second piece is like workload wise, when you're like stressed, if you don't keep your shit together and and you get stressed when everything is changing and you're under pressure as a company, that many companies are as these days, you're like, oh, and we need to do this and we need to do this, and you're pivoting all the time, not in a good way. You're just shifting priorities all the time. And then that creates so much workload that if someone doesn't stand their ground in the middle and ask how the hell fits the big picture, why should the teams do all of this?
But it's quite refreshing what you've just said there, because a lot of people don't address that around managing upwards. It's, and the middle managers, in their fair dues, they're the buffer. They have to manage upwards and they have to manage that. And they get a lot of shit. And it is hard. And there's comms with them every day of things to do. So they're trying to manage the day-to-day as well as everything else. But it is part of the job. And I think as the future leaders come up the ranks, having that awareness to that is important. Being brave and having those courageous conversations. And again, ego. My promotion, my career, I've got to protect. Well, then don't be a leader, because it's about people.
Exactly. And also, in all honesty, I think the best way to make your case to get promoted to higher management positions is if your team shines, because that means you can like amplify the impact to the business as you go up. It's not just about you. And I think the moment people realize it, all of our lives are going to be so much easier.
You've earned the trust. Now you got to keep showing up.
Yep.
That's so important. You don't want your people thinking you're a bit temperamental, or what's Maria going to be tomorrow? What coat is she going to be wearing? Is she going to be wearing a different color? You want to be dependable, reliable, consistent. And then the last one is rebuild. And trust always breaks. Corporates, your personal life. And then we go back to owning what's broken, owning why it's broken, and then getting to the root cause to fix it, and then showing proof that things are changing and you are doing what you said you. Because we can all say, sorry, you have to evidence what's the change we made and how we keep it on top of this, that it won't happen again, and we are driving the right outcomes.
Now the donut makes sense, because it is actually always a circle. It's not like one and done, trust, and then got it. Awesome. What popped into my mind while we were talking, I'm curious. Through layoffs and mistakes that are going to happen as companies try to adapt to AI, to everything, like mistakes, whether they're hostile or just the way they manage people, right? The trust will be broken, as you said. How do you build as a leader? How do you navigate this change? And how do you build from that? What are your thoughts?
So having gone to 3 redundancies myself, and many restructures in some of the corporates, and actually leading the comms side of that.
Okay.
And which has been, quite a challenge. I think the important part for me is around clarity. Being honest around the state of play. People are not stupid. You try and fob them off, they know you're fobbing them off. So be upfront.
Yeah.
If you're saying you're having a company restructure and there won't be any layoffs, and then 6 months later you're laying off people, trust is gone. And it's very hard to build that culture trust back once that cracks in the surface. And I think staying human is a really important one. Being accessible for your people. We can't know all the facts. It's impossible. But you can be there. You can explain what you know and what you don't know, rather than just try and fill the gaps. That doesn't help your people. It creates anxiety. So that's where managing upwards really important. The amount of times I've seen leaders have a toolkit or a playbook they've been given. Here's FAQs for you to go and manage your teams about this restructure. And when the teams ask them questions, they say, I don't know. It's just what I've been given.
Yeah. That's what we need to do. That's what
we've been told. So your people are left, sure, I don't understand the why. I don't understand how I fit into this change. We ask people constantly to adapt and pivot. And they're like, well, why should I? Because they can't see themselves in the change.
Yeah.
So that clarity is really important.
And also maybe you haven't communicated as a leader why the change is needed, what is coming next, and why do you lead it.
Correct. And going back to, they may not have that. Yes, but what I've seen sometimes, leaders don't get all the facts. But that's where their personality comes up to challenge, to ask those questions and not just keep quiet because they're told they don't know. It's like, if we all had an active role, imagine, perfect scenario, where you don't have to have the title of a leader to actually lead and do it inadvertently. But we all showed up with that courage, respectful, asking those questions. Trust came in naturally because of that. It would be such a harmonious place.
What you said resonated so much because one of the best examples of leadership I've seen at work, it was actually through the layoff time when we're going through it. We had, so our VP, who is leading 10,000 people on site, right? So you never see them normally. When she joined the company, it was the year before layoffs or a few months. It wasn't even like a build trust throughout. She made it the first 90 days like a personal bet to meet every single one of us. She was literally doing rounds in the desks in the offices every day to make sure she meets the teams and understand what everyone is doing. And she had lunches every day where they could go. So you could already see the openness and you felt like you can go and knock the door. So when the times where the layoffs happened, that did happen after a while in tech work then, she obviously had delivery news in the all hand setting. But then even at that point, she had cleared her calendar for the full week and she was like 10 times the office hours. Anyone that has questions, you come in directly and ask and let's discuss it. And just so you know, I'm here. And I don't know if people went and actually booked it, but even that is a signal that I have nothing to hide, or like I'm open or I'm here and it needs to happen. It is what it is. But let's talk about it.
That's successful. And she showed vulnerability there because she may have had people come to her who are angry and want to, vent off, but she made herself accessible. And that for me that's pure leadership in action. I don't know if I can just quickly share a story about Airbnb. So during the pandemic, I don't know if you were aware, but they had to do huge layoffs. Now, their CEO at the time went public, didn't go behind the press statement and hide, was very visible on LinkedIn. He wrote a letter and he basically asked his network on LinkedIn to give his people a job because he had to lay them off. And those people that got let off, trust retained with them.
Despite the
And their reputation actually served, and they built back the business back up. So that's an example of where true leadership in its purest form, this leader was just very, very present through the whole thing, constantly in the forefront of all the comms, through explaining what the decisions, they're really tough. Virgin were the same during the layoffs. And I did a stint work with Richard in India for a week and it was brilliant. And seeing him in action and how he was like, Maria, I don't kind of want to sit at all the big cheeses, but can we just go and meet the front line? And, he pulled up a chair and was asking people, tell me about your family. And it was like the celebrity was in the room and it changed the energy. And you could see when he left, people just wanted to give it their all. They were just like, I'm so proud to work for this brand. The learnings I got for him, he was very authentic. He wasn't into the schmoozing or the ass licking, as I call it. He was very, very grounded. I think they'd organised a Merc or something to pick him up in Mercedes. And he came back saying he didn't want it. He wanted a people carrier. Just a 4x4. So we got a Toyota Basic. So picked him up. I think the first question he asked me was, so how much, what's the revenue, whatever we've made in the first week of launch? And I didn't have those stats on me. So I'm desperately texting the CEO now, could you go with stats? Because he's asked me this question. But no, he was lovely. He was just, what you see on camera and all books and is him. And it was one of the best cultures. I say, I've worked for in my time. And going back to Virgin, when I started working for the CFO, Alan, he was my favorite boss of all time. I was his executive assistant at the time.
Okay. So not yet in people's culture,
Not
roles.
culture.
Yeah. Okay.
He saw potential in what I brought to him. So $2 billion acquisition. I supported him with that, obviously with the legal team and everything. Now, he saw the skills I brought, and then they sent me to India to help lead the people and culture venture.
Okay.
That's how I transitioned. And then that's how I've been able to pivot, because one of the things I think the success criteria of pivoting, and this is one of the things I want to share around adaptability.
Yeah.
Try and change your environment as much as you can. And when I mean that, don't leave your job, but if you get an opportunity to work in another team, right? So at Deloitte, I had the privilege of being the business product owner for a digital tool we built, a ways of working tool. And I had the honor to work with an amazing tech team. Now, I had no clue about tech before, but the sprints and agile methodology and all of the acronyms and the language that goes with it, I was immersed in that for 2 years. And they were my favorite people, because being able to pivot into something totally out of my comfort zone, I was able to give my culture and people experience lens into their technical lens.
Okay.
But it worked because we were both open and receptive to learning from each other. And the safety came in that team. Everyone
So the trust also.
Psychological safety was really high. It was one of the safest teams I've worked in.
How do you define safety?
A safe team is being able to express yourself and your views without worrying there'll be repercussions.
And how do you build it in the team?
Everyone plays a part in that. Leaders set the tone from the top. If they don't address things like the elephant in the room in a meeting, they set the tone because others follow that. That's not addressed, it's not safe for them. If they call out bad behavior, leaders, your team will follow. Okay, it's safe to do that. If they recognize collaboration and behaviors rather than performance and delivery, that's another way. So it's really the tone from the top. I can't say how pivotal that is. And having that boundary. So I've seen some leaders be your best friend. And when it comes to delivery constructive feedback, they haven't got the capability to do it because they feel bad, they don't want to be mean. But it's not about being mean, it's delivering the feedback to help the employee. But I think EQ comes into this again, because you can still be friendly and have a banter with your team, but that fine line is really important. And when you cross that, that's where everyone's confused, because then you can't lead in the way that you're paid to do, actually.
Yeah.
Rather than
When I break down the part of emotional intelligence, I always say, like, when they ask you the question, how would you define yourself as a leader in 2 words? Well, I don't like the word empathy, because I feel like empathy, it's that borderline of either getting down with you if you feel it, so I cannot pick you up, or like, I don't know, empathy for me, it's really deeply feeling what the other person is feeling. What I prefer, it's compassion, because compassion is more like, I understand what you're feeling, even if I don't feel it, but I'm going to do my best to do whatever I can in my capacity to help you go through it. Does it mean signing you off for however time you need if there's something going on? Does it mean taking work off you because you're operating at a capacity? Does this mean speaking up and managing up because this is happening, or because you saw it, you don't want to speak up, but I will do it on your behalf? So for me, empathy is a state and it doesn't necessarily bring solution. Compassion for me, it's the action driven. Okay, I understand. I don't have to feel it, but what can I do?
Yeah. And I think sometimes people aren't always looking for solutions. They want to feel heard.
Yeah, fair.
Right. So compassion, yes. Solutions, we can change, we prioritize work. But empathy is really about just listening to that person. I hear you. Must be
Holding the
hard.
space.
Holding the space. letting that person feel heard.
Mm.
We're fully present with them at the moment. They can leave the room and actually feel totally different at the end of it. Give the person space. If you can do anything, an action orientated to help, great. If you can't, do you listen and that's it.
Okay. Thank you for what master. Emotional intelligence. So we put things in order. Adaptability then. Going back to what you mentioned as a very important skill. So I personally feel adaptability is the number one skill we should all build. The adaptability muscle.
Yes.
Building our adaptability muscle. You know how we go to the gym and we
Yes.
build the physical muscle.
Yeah.
It's like it's a similar adaptability muscle in our brain that we need to train. And there is this new term. You know how we had IQ, the intelligence, EQ. There is now AQ. The new trend in the Q terminology, something which is the adaptability quality. I can't say that word, quality, and whatever it's the Q stands for.
Yes.
How would you break down adaptability? Like, okay, great word.
So let me bring this back to exposure.
Okay.
I mentioned exposure.
Changing your environment, right? That one. Yeah.
Now, I'll go back to my Army Reserves example. So when I joined the military reserves, what that meant was one evening a week, one weekend a month, and then 1 week a year that I would have to commit. But I did more than that. I ended up training as an instructor. I can teach you how to shoot, chemical warfare, and battlefield first aid. So I did quite a lot.
Yep.
What that did was 5 days a week, I was in a corporate office, glammed up, in my suit, talking the corporate language. And then weekends, I was in uniform, hair in a bun, totally different, direct, no fluff. And going from corporate to army, then corporate to army. My communication shifted. I didn't shift. Maria stayed as she is, her character. But my style sometimes had to change to adapt to those environments. But I never compromised me. So I've come up with a term, I call it situational authenticity.
Okay. Tell me about it.
I don't believe anyone brings their whole self to work. Personally. Although companies say, you want to bring your whole self to work.
Well, I'm not sure you want.
I'm not sure you want to, yeah. But I think we bring in parts of ourselves into work, into situations, but without changing who we are. That's really important. Because if you start showing up to a situation where you're not grounded in your values as you end up performing. Yeah. You're not being you. You're just performing on stage to a company and a role in a team. But if you stay grounded in those values, you end up leading. You're leading with your values and doing. So that adaptability, going back to my reserves experience, helped me when I went to Iraq because I had that corporate. And the reason why I did well in Iraq is because my communication, because I was able to adapt to a new culture through an interpreter and still get what I needed to get across without using rank. And it was all around reading the room, feeling, watching, all of those things. And now, if someone gives me feedback, right, that's critical, I won't kick off and go, well, what do you mean? I'll listen and go, okay, can you tell me more? I'm curious to understand. Oh, well, just to understand what's made them feel a certain way if they're uncomfortable. And I think that's really important in leadership around being able to manage your emotions. If something is said to you about whether it's feedback about your style or you are able to manage that rather than managing your employee like a child.
And exactly. And I'm going to add in here, I'm going to advertise the job of all of the coaches, executive coaches out there, because I generally think that unless you get a coach, it's very hard to see yourself in a mirror. You need to be very, very good at self-awareness. And that's where coaches are particularly good at.
Yeah.
That I think mirror, because it goes back to like, if your ego gets triggered, your response and your reaction is going to be very different. So it's like, but if you see it objectively, then it might be completely different answer.
And I love the therapy bit. because I had therapy. So when I came back from Iraq, I had PTSD and I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned about all this self-awareness bit, because I was like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah. We're all
And,
fine.
Maria wasn't fine. So it's fascinating, all of that. And you're absolutely right. I think therapy or coaching is the way forward. And it's such a good personal investment. You can't waste money on it. It's a no-brainer. And if everyone can do it, I would highly recommend it, because it will help you accelerate in life and be the best version of yourself.
So adaptability, my favorite topic. We have exposure. So put yourself in new environments so you can
Yeah.
learn to adapt and like basically pivot, learn something new more easily. It's that muscle, right? Strengthen the muscle. The second one, it's the situational authenticity.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what allows you as Maria to adapt maybe your communication and how you show up, but in an authentic way. What's the third one?
Anchoring.
Okay. What is anchoring?
Anchoring in your values. What are your non-negotiables?
Okay.
Understanding your triggers. And if you can anchor yourself when you get negative feedback, just say, it's priceless, because you take a breath, you pause. And that reflection bit's really important.
And you're so wise, because I did a course last year. It was like a mini MBA course on Berkeley. And when they were defining adaptability, one of the 5 pillars, it was about knowing your North Star and your values. And it's funny because if you talk about adaptability, we think flexibility. That is adapting and shifting from one place to another. And you would normally think like holding your ground or having something that is so stable, it's counterintuitive to adaptability. But unless you have that, you then just go where the wind goes. It's not intentional adaptability. We went really deep into the stuff, trust, the heavy words, everything. And I'm like, wait, I'm curious about your career. So we have the pivot, right? Army to corporate as an executive assistant, then to
Culture.
people and culture, then to yoga and meditation.
Yes.
What are the overarching things, your transferable skills that let's take the first example. Army to corporate. How did you make the case? How did you position yourself?
I didn't position myself. I wanted to do more. My gut was saying, really, I've got a niche. What does Maria need? I wanted more. I wanted more challenge.
Yeah.
I joined the reserves because I've always been fascinated in law.
Mm.
And also I'm into fitness. So getting paid, it was a no-brainer. So I made those choices. They were my choices. And I think the jobs I've fallen into, when I say fallen, the way I've showed up as Maria has built trust with those leaders that have seen my potential and capability, and then given me bigger opportunities that I probably wouldn't get if I applied for a job through LinkedIn. Say,
Exactly. Is it then natural network, not network in a way of go to events and network, but is one believes in you, like sponsors, one sees your value and sees before you can see what you can do,
yes,
and then kind of naturally leading into the other, whether is themselves giving the opportunity or referring or showing you what the path can be. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. But I think that's because I've been myself. It's like one door closes and the other opens, and that's been my life actually. And
You stop and listen to yourself. That's the difference. Then people don't.
but I think you need to have circumstances that push you to do that.
Okay.
So I was made redundant from Deloitte.
Yeah.
So I'm disclosing that now. And initially it was a bit of a shock. But actually after 2 weeks, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I wasn't fulfilled. I didn't feel my purpose was being served. And there was far more. My voice wasn't there. Because sometimes when you have big institutions, you lose your identity. You become the brand. And yeah. And then when you get that opportunity, it's like a no-brainer.
But this is also your adaptability shining through, because ego could have been triggered but you've sat with yourself and you've done work with yourself. So you chose to say, what is the true Marianne? Like that self-awareness. What do I actually want if you forget the external factors? And that can shift from a place of, not what is going on in ego to a place of growth mindset, which is what I call, which is like, actually, what does this tell me? And what is the opportunity here? Which is probably all of the amazing stuff and the keynote of consulting you're building, right?
And I think another factor about adaptability is I've not stayed in a job more than 6 years. And that's a choice I've made because, I've seen a lot of my friends have been in companies for 20 odd years. They're in a greenhouse and you can become in your own bubble, echo chamber, where you know nothing else. Everything's great inside. But, outside of that, there is a totally different way of thinking, different ways of working, things you might be missing in terms of your own growth.
Yeah.
So I think trying to stay relevant and pivoting is what's going to keep you fresh, especially with technology now and all this.
Well, I'm going to get your mindful yoga hack now out, because the thing that is playing in my mind is that with everything happening, as you said, and all the change and technology, I actually feel more and more people, like there's a stat, I think it's 84% millennials that are usually the middle management roles around that age are burned out. And I can feel it on myself because I consider myself quite advanced and solid when it comes to catching up with AI. I work at Google. I can be in front of the changes. So I have the information coming to me and I can process it in a way and use it. But I always feel behind. I feel that I can never keep up. There's not enough hours to do it. And I feel like it's natural. We're all going to end up there. So if as a leader, I think there is one element, which is what I'm trying to say is like, okay, burnout. What are some self-protective mechanisms you can put in place to prevent them? The other side is, if you as a leader, you're burned out, like I cannot imagine you having the patience to manage yourself and your emotions. You're just literally a teaching bomb, right? So how do you manage yourself while managing the team when you're in that state?
So I think let's start from a leadership perspective. I think know thyself and understanding your boundaries. And being able to articulate and communicate those boundaries. And then courage, not to be scared. If you need to clock off at 5 and your working hours are X to Z, that's clear. Understanding yourself of when the pressure starts bubbling, because it's very subtle. And when we really stop, we can feel it. But when we're on autopilot, we don't until we crash and burn, and then we're on the floor and we're burnt out. Often corporates will give loads of support as a sort of, reactive mechanism rather than being proactive.
Exactly. Well,
so from a leadership perspective, I think it's a bit like the airline, isn't it? Putting your gas masks on before you look off.
Oh, yes. Right.
Yes.
Put yours before, put yours. Right. Good metaphor.
And again, managing upwards. It's not, you don't get a badge of honor because you work till 10 o'clock at night and are able to output however many things. It's more around what's possible in the working hours. And where is AI supporting you to do the admin? So you can do the stuff that humans are there to do that AI can't do. So I think all of that will play a big part in terms of well-being and burnout. So leader, put your mask on first. Have your boundaries, manage upwards, communicate effectively, courage to say.
Through all of this career and so many pivots you've done, what are the absolute transferable skills that you would give as advice to the people watching?
So my transferable skills, I would think, was my self-awareness, communication, behavioral context. So being able to simplify, building trust and influencing, because that's how I get most of my work done. And being open, being flexible, not rigid. Because I think we talk about this growth mindset so much that it's a bit of a label.
It starts with curiosity.
So try and be as open and flexible as possible.
What advice would you give to your younger self, your mid-30s self?
Don't try to outrun yourself
Mm-hmm.
or earn your place, because we all have a place. Trust your instincts sooner. Your gut is normally right. And things will change in life unexpectedly. If you know your values and you ground yourself in them, they'll guide you. They're your compass. You'll be fine. So that's what I would say to me.
Well, what do you say to me? And the audience?
What would I say to the audience? Don't clip your wings in environments where you can't fly.
Yes.
You are in control. Often the environment, it's never about one person. If we're not happy, it's often the environment that's restricting us. Change it. Just pay attention when you're at work, whenever, tomorrow. Observe how you show up. What impact you have on others. Just notice how you speak, your body language. That's the starting point. And I think when you start noticing how you show up every day, that's your self-awareness in action, building that muscle. And that's going to help you be more adaptable.